Desaturated images of Vietnam in 1970 focus on weary, exhausted soldiers, brutal effectiveness of guerrilla warfare, and the increasing psychological toll on troops. The pervasive humidity, the dense foliage, the feeling of being constantly watched, sounds, distant echoing small arms fire, the incessant buzz of unseen insects, the wet drip of humidity from leaves, a subtle, almost subliminal moan or sigh in the background. Asterisk, the year was 1970. By then, Vietnam was no longer just a war. It was a wound, a bleeding wound on the earth, and on the souls of the men who fought there. The initial idealism had long been replaced by a grim, day-to-day struggle for survival. Every step was a gamble. Every shadow a potential ambush. The jungle itself became a living, breathing entity, constantly shifting, constantly watching. And sometimes it whispered. Asterisk transition to a faded, almost ghost-like photograph of a specific infantry platoon, perhaps 12 to 15 men. Zoom in on their tired, weary faces. The sounds of the jungle become more immediate and oppressive. Rustling leaves, dripping water, unseen movements. The subtle moan or sigh grows slightly more distinct, almost like a faint, disembodied lament. Among the countless units swallowed by that green hell was Bravo Company's Shadow Platoon, hardened, cynical, and pushed to their breaking point by months of relentless patrols and unseen enemies. Sergeant Bull O'Malley, grizzled platoon leader Corporal Ramirez, the quiet, observant point man Doc Miller, the ever-weary medic, and the rest, men defined by the weight of their rifles and the pervasive fear in their eyes. Asterisk, a hand traces a route on a worn, rain-stained military map. The designated area is a particularly dense, dark green section marked as unstable. Zone Delta 9 sounds. The mournful moan or sigh becomes a distinct low hum or drone, like a forgotten tune played by the wind. Asterisk, their mission, a deep patrol into unstable Zone Delta 9, a vast, unexplored expanse of primary jungle rumored to be a sanctuary for elusive Viet Cong units. Local Montana tribesmen spoke of the crying forests and trees that weep for the lost. Warnings dismissed by command as primitive superstition, but in Vietnam, dismissing local wisdom often proved fatal. The Shadow Platoon was about to step into a nightmare far older than any war, where the very air was alive with sorrow, and the trees themselves had voices. Asterisk, the platoon moves with extreme caution through incredibly dense primary jungle. The light barely penetrates the canopy. The air feels heavy, humid, oppressive. Sounds, the squelch of boots in mud, the constant rhythmic drip, drip, drip of water from unseen leaves, an unsettling absence of typical jungle sounds, birds, monkeys, insects replaced by an eerie, profound stillness. The faint, high-pitched whine or hum is present, almost subliminal. Asterisk, as the Shadow Platoon pushed deeper into unstable Zone Delta 9. The jungle's oppressive embrace tightened. The light dimmed, swallowed by the impossibly thick canopy. What struck them first was the overwhelming humidity clinging to their skin like a second uniform. But what chilled them to the bone was the profound, unnatural silence, the usual symphony of jungle life. The chirping of insects, the calls of birds was utterly absent. Only the rhythmic drip of moisture from the leaves broke the oppressive stillness. Asterisk, Corporal Ramirez. One man suddenly freezes, holding up a clenched fist. His eyes dart around nervously. He hears something, sounds. The dripping sound fades. Very faint, almost imperceptible, high-pitched whimper or sobbing sound, like a child crying from a great distance, begins to permeate the air. It's carried on a non-existent breeze. Asterisk, Corporal Ramirez, their most experienced scout, was the first to feel it. He stopped abruptly, his fist raised, his eyes wide, scanning the unnervingly silent foliage. Then, from the absolute stillness, very faint, almost imperceptible, high-pitched whimper, like a child crying from a great distance, seemed to drift through the air, carried on a non-existent breeze. It was gone as quickly as it came, leaving them with nothing but the chilling echo of what might have been. Asterisk, Sergeant O'Malley tries to dismiss it as wind or a trick of the mind. Doc Miller checks his instruments, but finds nothing unusual. Private Johnson, a young recruit, visibly shivers, pulling his rifle tighter. Sounds, O'Malley's gruff voice trying to rationalize. The faint, disembodied sobbing returns, slightly clearer, then fades again. The air feels heavy with unseen presence. Sergeant O'Malley voice gruff, but with an underlying hint of unease. Just the wind, boys. Or too much damn weed. Sergeant O'Malley tried to dismiss it as the wind or a trick of their exhausted minds. Doc Miller, ever the pragmatist, checked his instruments but found nothing amiss yet. Private Johnson, the young recruit, shivered uncontrollably. The oppressive atmosphere getting to him, the faint, disembodied sobbing returned slightly clearer. This time, then vanished again, leaving behind an even heavier silence. As they discover an area where ancient trees appear to be weeping, a dark, viscous, almost blood-like sap oozes from their trunks, collecting in dark, stagnant pools on the forest floor. The air around these trees is unnaturally cold. Sounds the sickening drip 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 of the viscous sap hitting the stagnant pools. A faint mournful hum or lament can be heard emanating from the weeping trees themselves. As their patrol led them to an unsettling sight, a grove of ancient trees that appeared to be weeping. A dark, viscous, almost blood-like sap oozed from their gnarled trunks, collecting in dark, stagnant pools on the forest floor. The air around these trees was unnaturally cold, piercing through their fatigues. And from the very heart of the grove, a faint, mournful hum, a profound lament, seemed to emanate directly from the weeping trees themselves. It was the sound of ancient sorrow. Night falls. The jungle is pitch black, illuminated only by the faint glow of chem lights and the team's flashlights. The atmosphere is extremely tense and claustrophobic. The air is thick with a palpable sense of unease. Sounds, the constant, unsettling whimper and sobbing are now louder, a distinct, high-pitched chorus. Distorted whispers seem to follow them, always just out of reach. The low, mournful hum is a constant presence. As night descended upon Delta 9, it brought with it a darkness far deeper than mere absence of light. The jungle, once merely weeping, now seemed to lament aloud, its ancient sorrow permeating the very air. The constant, unsettling whimper and sobbing became a distinct, high-pitched chorus. Distorted whispers seemed to follow them, always just out of reach, playing on their fears. Close up on Private Johnson, on guard. He sees quick, fleeting shadows flit through the trees, always just out of focus. He hears voices calling his name or mocking him in Vietnamese. He starts to talk to himself, trying to make sense of it. Sounds Johnson's panic breathing. Whispers converge, calling his name, twisting into mocking Vietnamese phrases. A soft, almost childlike giggle emanates from the shadows, then vanishes. Private Johnson voice whispering frantically to himself. It's just the wind. Just a goddamn wind. Private Johnson, on first watch, was the first to openly crack. He swore he saw fleeting shadows flit through the trees, always just out of focus. He heard voices, distinct and terrifying, calling his name or mocking him in guttural Vietnamese. He began to talk to himself, trying to rationalize the onslaught of auditory hallucinations. A soft, almost childlike giggle seemed to emanate from the shadows, then vanished, leaving him trembling. Sergeant O'Malley tries to calm Johnson, but even O'Malley's face is itched with growing doubt and fear. Doc Miller checks Johnson, finding no fever, but seeing profound, unadulterated terror in his eyes. Sounds O'Malley's strained voice. The whispers and sobs intensify whenever they argue or show fear. A subtle, high-pitched, almost insect-like chittering can be heard, just at the edge of hearing. Sergeant O'Malley voice, strained, frustrated. Johnson, get a hold of yourself. It's just jungle fatigue. Sergeant O'Malley tried to calm him, but even his own face was etched with growing doubt. Doc Miller found no fever, no physical ailment, only the profound, unshakable terror in the young man's eyes. The whispers and sobs intensified, seeming to feed on their rising fear and discord. A subtle, high-pitched, almost insect-like chittering could be heard, just at the edge of hearing, like a million tiny teeth grinding. Corporal Ramirez, the point man, suddenly points into the darkness. He sees faint, ethereal, glowing blue or white lights like will-o'-the-wisps, flickering amongst the trees, seeming to lure them deeper. As he points, the lights pulse faintly. Sounds Ramirez's sharp gasp. The mournful wail of the forest becomes louder, almost invitingly. The whispers form coherent sentences, promising solace or madness. Corporal Ramirez's voice, terrified whisper, lights in the trees. Then Corporal Ramirez, the stoic point man, pointed a trembling finger into the oppressive darkness. Faint, ethereal glowing blue or white lights like ghostly will-o'-the-wisps flickered amongst the ancient trees, seemingly beckoning them deeper into the forest's embrace. As he pointed, the lights pulsed faintly, and the mournful wail of the forest grew louder, almost invitingly. The whispers now formed coherent sentences in their minds, promising solace or more insidiously mad. The platoon is now heavily disoriented, lost. The jungle seems to shift around them. The lights are everywhere, beckoning. The sounds are overwhelming. Soldiers are visibly fraying, some talking to themselves, others staring blankly. Sounds. The cacophony of whispers, sobs, wails, and the maddening chittering is constant and overwhelming. Distorted human voices, their own or fallen comrades, echo and overlap. Asterisk by day 4. Platoon was profoundly lost, their internal compass shattered. The jungle itself seemed to shift around them, the glowing lights flickering everywhere, beckoning from every direction. The cacophony of whispers, sobs, wails, and the maddening chittering was constant and overwhelming. Distorted voices, their own or those of fallen comrades, echoed and overlapped in their minds, tearing at the fabric of their sanity. Asterisk a soldier, e.g. Private Harris, suddenly screams, firing his rifle wildly into the darkness at an unseen enemy. He is convinced he sees ghosts of dead Viet Cong or illusions of his own dead friends attacking him. Sounds. Harris's panicked, guttural scream, rapid, uncontrolled gunfire. The chilling giggles and mocking whispers intensify as he fires, as if the unseen entities are enjoying his breakdown. Asterisk Private Harris voice, maniacal, screaming, "Get out of my head! Get out, I see you!" Asterisk Private Harris pushed past the breaking point, screamed, firing his rifle wildly into the darkness. He swore he saw the ghosts of Viet Cong, or even worse, terrifying illusions of his dead friends attacking him. His frantic, uncontrolled gunfire ripped through the silence, but the chilling giggles and mocking whispers only intensified, as if the unseen entities were enjoying his complete breakdown. Asterisk Sergeant O'Malley tries to restrain Harris, but Harris fights back, convinced O'Malley is also an illusion or a threat. The team becomes fragmented, turning on each other due to paranoia. Sounds. O'Malley has strange shouts, Harris's struggles and distorted cries, the sound of a knife being drawn, the growing clamor of multiple overlapping whispers and sobs. Asterisk Sergeant O'Malley voice, desperate, Harris, stand down, it's me. Asterisk Sergeant O'Malley tried to restrain Harris, but the young man fought back with terrifying strength, convinced O'Malley was also an illusion, or worse, a threat. The platoon, once a cohesive unit, became fragmented, each man succumbing to his own torment, turning on each other, fueled by profound paranoia. Asterisk Doc Miller, in a desperate attempt to help, might be overwhelmed by the sights and sounds, collapsing to his knees, clutching his head. He might scream about faces in the trees or the dead pulling at him. Sounds. Doc's pain screams. The maddening cacophony of voices and sounds reaches a terrifying peak, as if the jungle itself is screaming, a distinct, deep, mournful roar or wail from the very heart of the forest. Asterisk Doc Miller voice screaming, incoherent. They're here. The faces, they're pulling me down. The lost, they're screaming. Asterisk Doc Miller, the quiet, observant medic, collapsed to his knees, clutching his head, screaming about faces in the trees and the dead pulling at him. The maddening cacophony of voices and sounds reached a terrifying peak, as if the jungle itself was screaming. And then, from the very heart of the ancient forest, a distinct, deep, mournful roar or wail echoed, a sound of profound sorrow and ancient hunger. Asterisk the few remaining survivors are completely surrounded by the flickering lights and the overwhelming sounds. They are physically and mentally shattered. Their rifles feel useless. Sounds. The roar, wail from the forest is now a constant, deafening sound, pulsating with malevolence. The whispers are no longer individual, but a collective, disembodied drone, a singing of the forest that pulls at their sanity. Asterisk there was no retreat, only the reckoning. The few remaining men, shattered beyond recognition, were completely surrounded by the flickering lights and the overwhelming sounds. Their rifles felt useless, their training irrelevant. The roar and wail from the forest became a constant, deafening sound, pulsating with an ancient malevolence. The whispers were no longer individual, but a collective, disembodied drone, a singing of the forest that pulled at their very sanity. Asterisk one by one, soldiers succumbed. They don't die by conventional means. Perhaps they simply fall silent, their eyes empty, and they walk away into the dense foliage drawn by the lights never to be seen again. They turn on each other in a final, horrifying act of madness, convinced their comrades are the source of the torment. The sounds of desperate, final struggles, faint fading shouts, the triumphant giggles of the unseen entities, the soft rustle of uniforms as bodies collapse or are dragged away. The jungle claimed its tribute. One by one, men succumbed not to bullets but to the overwhelming despair and madness. Some simply fell silent, their eyes empty, and walked way into the dense foliage drawn by the flickering lights never to be seen again. Others, consumed by paranoia, turned on each other in a final, horrifying act of self-destruct, convinced their comrades were the source of the torment. The triumphant giggles of the unseen entities echoed through the trees, relishing their victory. Sergeant O'Malley and Corporal Ramirez are the last two, battered and on the verge of collapse. They stare at each other, their faces reflecting the profound horror. The glowing lights converge on them. The overwhelming chorus of whispers and sobs is suffocating. The distinct chittering sound is right in their ears. The mournful roar pulses seemingly from inside their chests. Sergeant O'Malley and Corporal Ramirez were the last two, battered, bloodied, and on the verge of collapse. They stared at each other, their faces reflecting the profound horror of their ordeal. The glowing lights converged on them, forming a pulsating halo of death. The overwhelming chorus of whispers and sobs was suffocating. The distinct chittering sound was right in their ears. The mournful roar pulsed seemingly from inside their chests, demanding their surrender. Final. Desperate push, they might stumble upon an ancient moss-covered, almost glowing stone altar, covered in crude, spiraling symbols where the sound seemed to originate. They unleashed their last grenades or fire wildly, not at a physical enemy, but at the source of the torment. A desperate yell from O'Malley, the roar of grenades exploding, a final, piercing, almost mechanical scream that sounds like metal, tearing, followed by an immediate, profound, and absolute silence. Sergeant O'Malley voice, a final raw scream of defiance. You want me? Here I am. In a final, desperate act of defiance, O'Malley and Ramirez stumbled upon an ancient, moss-covered stone altar, faintly glowing with an unnatural light covered in crude, spiraling symbols, the source of the malevolent energy. With a raw scream, O'Malley unleashed his last grenades, not at a physical enemy, but at the very source of their torment. A deafening series of explosions ripped through the silence, followed by a final, piercing, almost mechanical scream that sounded like metal tearing apart, and then absolute, profound silence. The narrator and Ramirez, bruised, disoriented, stumble out of unstable zone Delta 9 back into a more familiar but still dangerous part of the jungle. Their uniforms are torn, their faces etched with profound trauma. The sky is gray, raining softly. The gentle patter of rain. The pervasive silence from the haunted zone has left a permanent mark. The distant sounds of battle are still present, but they feel detached, unreal. They emerged from unstable zone Delta 9 as broken men, two survivors from a platoon of 15. They carried no bullet wounds from the Viet Cong, but the scars etched onto their minds were deeper, far more insidious. They had faced an enemy beyond their understanding, primordial force that reveled in ancient sorrow and the madness it wrought. A shot of O'Malley and Ramirez back at base camp. They are isolated, haunted. Other soldiers give them wide berth. They look perpetually tired, their eyes holding a distant, fearful look. The ambient sounds of a military base, distant chatter. Vehicles, but they all sound muted, alien, as if the survivors are still trapped in their own silent nightmare. Their fragmented reports of whispers, crying trees, and unseen voices were met with medical diagnoses of severe combat fatigue, jungle madness. They were quickly rotated out, sent home, their story filed away as another tragic, if inexplicable, casualty of the war's psychological toll. But they knew the truth. They had walked into a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where ancient legends still breathed, and where the forest itself was a living, malevolent entity. A final, wide aerial shot of the vast, green, innocent-looking Vietnamese jungle. Camera slowly zooms in on the specific area of unstable zone Delta 9. which looks just like any other patch of trees, perhaps a slightly darker, more ominous green. The sounds of the jungle are peaceful again, just before the screen fades to black. A very faint, lingering, almost imperceptible whimper or sigh can be heard, suggesting the horror still resides there, waiting. The Vietnam War eventually ended. Soldiers returned home, bearing the visible and invisible scars of combat. But for men like Sergeant O'Malley and Corporal Ramirez, the battle raged on within their minds. They had gone looking for an enemy base, only to become prey for something far older than any war. Deep within that untouched jungle, in the chilling heart of the whispering trees, the ancient lament still echoes, its mournful cries drawing in the lost, for in that sacred, cursed place the war continues long after the last soldier has left, and those who hear its voice will never truly be silent again.